Please don't stroll. Let's talk for a moment. I need your opinion on this matter. My friend John is matter. My friend John is matter. My friend of trouble that involves the lower money, but the kind that hollows a man out from the inside until there's nothing left but a shell and a memory. I've been sitting across from him for 3 hours in this dimly lit diner, watching him stare into a cup of coffee that went cold long before the sun went down. He's grieving, but the person he's grieving isn't dead. She's just leaving. And the worst part is, they are still desperately, agonizingly in love. How do you say goodbye to someone you still love? How do you let go of the hand that fits perfectly in yours, knowing that once you let go, the air will feel colder than it ever has before? John and Sarah have been the golden couple of our circle for 7 years. They have this is lie, it's clomp this, troll of this, like this. They have that kind of love that makes you believe in the universe again. A life isn't a one she's sacrificed everything for is taking her to not follow because of his own responsibilities to his sick mother and his family's legacy here. There is no villain, is top ticking. I watched him try to pack her suitcase earlier. Every item he tucked into that nylon bag felt like a betrayal. He picked up a sweater she wore on their first trip to the mountains. And for a second, I thought I'd break. He held it to his face, breathing in the scent of her, that mix of vanilla and laundry detergent. And his shoulders shook. He didn't cry out loud. It was silent, violent sort of shaking. He told me later that it felt like he was packing it across the ocean. They spent the evening trying to make one last memory, but that's the cruelty of it. Isn't it when you know it's the last time, you can actually enjoy it. The laugh is shadowed by the realization that you won't hear that sound in person again for a long time, maybe ever. Every touch of her skin, the pulse in her wrist, the way a certain look in her eyes means she's about to say something funny. John told me it feels like he's trying to drink the entire ocean because he knows he's about to enter a desert. He asked me how am I supposed this, how do I turn my back and walk toward the exit when everything I care about is moving the opposite direction. I didn't have an answer. I've seen breakups where people scream and throw things. And honestly, those seem easier. Anger is a shield. But what do you do when there is only tenderness? What do you do when the goodbye isn't an ending of feeling, but just an ending of presence? They are currently sitting in his car outside her apartment. I'm waiting at a distance, making sure he's okay, but I can see them through the windshield. They aren't talking anymore. They're just leaning their foreheads against each other, It's the most beautiful and devastating thing I've ever seen. It's the silence of two people who have said everything there is to say, yet feel like they've said nothing at all. John is in trouble because he thinks that saying goodbye means he has to stop loving her. He thinks he has to find a way to turn off the light so he can live in the dark. But how do you tell your heart to beat differently? I want to tell him that maybe you don't actually say goodbye to the love. Maybe you just say goodbye to the now. Maybe you carry that love like a heavy, golden weight in your pocket. And it changes you, and it hurts, that it stays. But looking at him now, I realize that words are useless. He is facing the literal amputation of his soul. He has to watch her recur a security gate, watch her become a silhouette. And then a speck. And then a memory. He has to go back to an apartment that will smell like her for exactly 3 days before the air turns neutral. He has to learn how to sleep on only one side of the bed again. I'm watching the minutes crawl by on the dashboard clock. 12:46. 12:46. Every tick is a theft. He's terrified that if he closes his eyes, he'll lose the sharpness of her image. He's terrified that I love you won't be enough to bridge the terror of it. That's the terror of it. I need to know what you think, because I have to go talk to him in a few minutes. I have to be the one to drive him home when that plane disappears into the clouds. I have to be the one to help him stand up when his legs give out. So tell me, how do you actually do it? How do you find the strength to say the final word when your heart is screaming for you to stay silent and just hold on for one more second? Is it better to make it quick and sharp like a surgical cut, or do you linger in the pain until there's nothing left? And most importantly, how do you keep living in a world that feels completely empty, even when it's full of people? What would you tell John if you were standing here with me? Watching a man lose the only thing that makes him feel alive. It's 1:45 a.m. now. The streetlights outside Sarah's apartment are flickering, casting long, jagged shadows across the pavement. And I'm still sitting here in my car, gripped by the sheer weight of what's happening a few yards away. John just stepped out of his car to help her with the last of her bags. I saw him stumble, just a slight trip over the curb, and for a second, I thought he was going to just stay down. He looks like a man carrying a mountain on his shoulders. He's doing that thing where he tries to be that thing. He's checking her passport, making sure she has her boarding pass printed, fussing over the weight of her carry-on. It's a distraction, a desperate attempt to focus on the logistics because the emotion is too big to swallow. But I can see his hands. They haven't stopped trembling since we left the diner. Every time he touches her luggage, it's like he's touching a headstone. I keep wondering, is there a right way to handle these final hours? I've been trying to think of something to say to him when we finally get to the airport, something that doesn't sound like a hollow glitch. Time heals all wounds feels like a lie when you're watching someone else's heart get real time. You'll find someone else is an insult. How do you tell a man who has found his person that the world will keep spinning? The world is ending at Terminal 3. They're back in the car now, heading toward the highway. I'm following at a distance. The red glow of his taillights looking like two bleeding eyes in the dark. Silence of the city at 300 a.m. is deafening. It's that eerie liminal time where the rest of the world is dreaming, completely unaware that for one person, the nightmare is just beginning. I can see the silhouettes of their heads in the car ahead of me. They're looking at each other. Every red light is a blessing because it means they have 60 more seconds of being in the same space. John texted me a few minutes ago, just one line. I don't think I can breathe. What do you do when your friend tells you that? I wanted to tell him to pull over, to scream, to tell her to stay, but I can't. This is the trouble where the right is talking about as the hardest thing to do is the hardest thing a human can endure. Love isn't always about holding on. Sometimes it's about the devastating sacrifice of letting go because it makes the air any easier to breathe. We've reached the airport perimeter. The bright, artificial glow of the terminal lights feels aggressively cold. It's too clinical for a tragedy. We pull into the jet engines overhead is like a low, constant roar of impending doom. John kills the engine. John kills the engine. I pull up behind. Knuckles are white. I feel like an intruder on a sacred moment, yet I can't leave him. He told me he can still smell her perfume on his seatbelt. He's terrified that if he goes inside, the reality will finally settle in and he'll never be able to get back. How do you help someone through the first hour of being alone? Do I leave him so he can private, or do I stay and force him to eat, to talk, to exist? If you were in his shoes, would you want someone to silence, or would you want someone to scream into the void with you? And tell me honestly, do you think all of like this can survive the distance, or is this just the beginning of a long funeral? How do you tell the difference between a goodbye for now and a pain feels exactly the same? Sun is starting to bleed over the horizon now, pale, sickly yellow that doesn't feel like a new beginning at all. It feels like an ending. We finally made it inside his house, but the silence here is different than it was 3 hours ago. It's heavy. It's heavy. It's the kind of silence that has a physical weight, pressing down on the furniture, the walls. It was especially on John. He's sitting on the edge of the sofa, still wearing his coat. He looks like a guest in his own home, like he's waiting for someone to tell him it's okay to sit down. Or like he's expecting Sarah to walk around the corner any second and ask where he put the keys. But she won't. She's currently 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, moving further away from him with every heartbeat. I went into the kitchen to make some tea myself, something to do, to stop my own hands from shaking, and that's when I saw it, on the counter. There's a half-empty glass of water she must have poured right before the airport. There's a faint smudge of her lipstick on the rim. It's such a tiny, insignificant thing, but it felt like a grenade going off in the room. It's a physical piece of her, a biological now, sitting there while she is already was. I had to hide the glass behind the toaster. I couldn't let him see it. John finally spoke. He didn't look at me. He just stared at the rug. I keep checking my pocket for my phone. He whispered, I want to text her that I got home safe. I want to tell her that the house feels too big. But her phone is in airplane mode. She's in the sky. She's in a space where I can reach her, and I realize that's my life now. She's always going to be in a space where I can't quite reach her. He looked up at me then, and his eyes were bloodshot, the pupils blown wide with shock. How do people do this for years? How do you live a life through a screen? How do you live a life through a scream? How do you kiss a glowing piece of glass? And if I feel like I'm mourning someone who is still breathing, that feels like a special kind of hell. If she were dead, but she's is having her dreams, and she's chasing her dreams, and I have to lunch simultaneously dying inside. That's the trouble is like this, the trouble of long distance love. You want them to succeed. You want them to succeed. You want them to fly, but every inch of their success is a mile of distance between your bodies. He's caught in this impossible tug of war between being a supporter for hurting, because his hurt feels like a weight on her wings. He walked into their bedroom. I followed him, worried he might just collapse, and he stopped dead in the doorway. She had left an old t-shirt on her pillow. He picked it up, buried his face in it, and finally, the dam broke. He didn't just cry, he fell apart. It was a guttural, primal sound, the sound of a man realizing that the person who has known 7 years is no longer in his sky. I'm sitting on the floor in the hallway now, giving him some space but staying close enough so he knows he's not alone. I'm looking at the clock. It's 7, hasn't even thought about coming up yet. I need to ask you because I'm starting to lose my own perspective. Fear, is it possible to love someone too much for your own good? I'm watching John, and I'm wondering if it would have been kinder if they had just broken up. If they had fought, if they had found a reason to be angry, would this be easier? Or is this agony the price you pay for something that was actually real? And what do I do when he gets that first text, when she lands and says, "I'm here, I miss you," and the reality of the distance hits him all over again? Do I encourage him to stay on the phone for 6 hours a day? Or do I tell him he needs to learn how to walk on his own feet again? How do you support a friend who is holding on to a ghost that is still alive? How do you tell someone that goodbye isn't a word, but a long, slow process of exhaling until you don't remember what it's like to have a full chest? I'm scared for him. I'm scared that he's going to spend the next years waiting for a life that is currently happening somewhere else. Tell me, honestly, how do you tell someone you love goodbye without losing yourself in the process? Can you ever really say goodbye to someone who still owns every corner of your heart? The sound of his sobbing finally stopped about 20 minutes ago, replaced by a silence that is somehow even more unsettling. It's the silence of exhaustion, the kind that comes when your body simply runs out of the chemicals it needs to keep crying. I'm still out here in the hallway, leaning against the wall, watching the dust motes dance in a sliver of morning light. It's a beautiful morning outside. That feels like a personal insult to everything John is going through. He walked out of the bedroom just now. He's changed into a clean shirt, but he looks 10 years older than he did when we were at the diner. He went straight to the kitchen. I think he forgot I was even here for a second, and he saw the glass of water. The one I tried to hide. He didn't move it. He just stood there, staring at that tiny smudge of lipstick on the rim like it was a holy relic. I can't even wash the dishes, he's voice paper thin. If I wash this glass, he's really gone. If I leave it here, it's like a piece of her is still staining. How pathetic is that? I'm holding on to a dirty glass because it's the last thing she touched that hasn't been cleaned of her yet. Then his phone buzzed on the counter. The sound was sharp like a gunshot in the quiet house. We both froze. We knew what it was. Her plane must have landed. She must have turned off airplane mode. John didn't pick it up at first. He just looked at the glowing screen. I could see the reflection of a light in his eyes. It was a text. I didn't mean to look, but I saw the name, Sarah, with a little heart next to it. He picked it up with a hand that was shaking so violently I thought he'd drop it. He read the message, and for a second, a ghost of a smile touched his lips, but it was immediately chased away by a look of pure, but adulterated agony. She says the city looks beautiful of this. He landed, he whispered. He says she misses me already. He looked at me, and his eyes were begging for an answer I didn't have. How do I reply to that? Do I tell her I'm sitting here staring at a glass of water? Do I tell her how much I'm breaking? I'll ruin her first day. I'll make it like a burden, but if I say this is the hidden trap of saying goodbye to someone you love. The goodbye doesn't end at the airport. It repeats itself every time the phone rings. It repeats itself every time you want to share a joke, or a frustration, or a mundane detail about you. He ended up typing, "So glad you're safe. I'm proud of you. I love you more than words." He put the phone face down and walked to the window. I feel like I'm living into different time zones at once, he said. My body is here, and my mind is trying to figure out where she is, what she's seeing. I'm already starting to calculate the hours. If it's 800 p.m. there, she'll be having lunch soon. I wonder if she'll find a place she likes. I watched him, and it hit me John is entering a long-term state of waiting. And that's the real trouble. When you love someone who isn't there, you stop living in the present. You start living for the next phone call, the next visit, the next phone call, the next visit. You start treating your own life like a waiting room. I want to tell him to go for a walk. I want to tell him to meet the guys for a beer at night. I want to tell him that he needs to keep his own world spinning so he doesn't drown in the silence of his house. But as his friend, I also know that right now, you can't bypass this kind of pain. You have to go through the center of it. But I'm worried. I'm worried about the slow fade. I'll have less slow fade. I'm worried about the slow fade. I'm worried that the I miss you will start to feel like a script. I've seen it happen before. Distance doesn't just have a relationship. You'll lose the small things, the way they smell when they wake up, the way they hand you a cup of coffee, the way they look when they're thinking about nothing in particular. You're left with the big things aren't enough to sustain a daily life. John turned back to me. Am I a fool for thinking we can make this work? Everyone says long distance is a death sentence. Are we just dragging out the execution? I looked at him and I thought about the way they looked at each other at the airport. That was a love that was ready to die. It was a love that was being forced into a cocoon. But I don't know if it'll come out, if it'll just wither away in the dark. I have to leave him soon. I have to go to work, to my own life, to a world that hasn't stopped turning. I'll leave him in this quiet house with his dirty glass of water and his two time zones. I need your perspective on one more thing. What does holding on become holding back? At what point do you realize that the most loving thing you can do is to actually let go? But of the hope that things will go back to how they were. And for John, what do I do tonight? Do I come back over? Do I bring dinner, or do I let him face the first night is when the bed feels the biggest? The first night is when the silence finally starts to scream. How do you tell someone how to survive the first 24 hours of a broken heart that hasn't actually broken up? What is the kindest thing a friend can do in this situation? I'm all ears because I'm watching my best friend disappear into a memory, and I don't know how to pull him back. The clock on the wall is ticking louder now, or maybe it's just that the rest us that the world has gone so quiet. It's nearly 400 p.m., I stayed. I couldn't bring myself to walk out that door and told him yes. I called into work and told them, and in a way it's true. John, his family is an ocean away. It's true, John, his family is an orphan of the heart. I tried to get him out of the house. I thought maybe some fresh air, the sight of people moving, the mundane noise of the city would ground him. We went to the grocery store, the one they always went to on Sunday afternoons. That was a mistake. A massive, crushing mistake. A massive. We were walking down the international aisle, and he reached for a jar of those expensive olives Sarah loves. His hand was halfway to the shelf before he stopped. He just stood there, his fingers hovering and my trembling. He realized he didn't need to buy them. He realized that for the first time in 7 years, what we had become boring way possible. He looked at the shopping cart, which was mostly empty except for a loaf of bread and some milk, and he looked like he was going to vomit. I don't know how to shop for one person, and it was the most pathetic. And it was the I've cooked for nearly a decade was a conversation with her. What do I do now? Just eat over the sink. Do I sit at the table and look at her empty chair? I feel like I'm disappearing. I feel like I'm disappearing. I feel like I'm disappearing, like not actually exist. That's the trouble that no one warns you about. When you love someone that deeply, they become the mirror you used to see yourself. Without them, you're just a ghost haunting your own life. We're back at the house now. The shadows are getting long again. The 20-hour mark since we first sat in that diner is approaching, and the fatigue is starting to turn into he's pacing. He's checked his phone 30 times in the last hour, even though he knows she's busy at her new apartment, probably unpacking boxes and trying to figure out how the light switches work in a foreign city. And then, the phone rang, not a text this time, a FaceTime call. I watched him scramble for it like it was a life raft. He hit accept, and there she was, a rather pixelated, slightly lagging version of her. The connection was shaky. The audio had that metallic. "Hi," she said. and even through the tinny speakers, I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Hi," John said. He was smile that looked like it was being held up by fish hooks. He was trying so hard to be the supportive boyfriend. He asked about the apartment. He asked about the weather, about the weather, about the weather, about the flight. He didn't mention the glass of water. He didn't mention that he felt like he was drowning in the middle of a dry room. But then, the screen froze. Her face stayed there, caught in a mid-blink expression, blurry and distorted. John tapped the screen frantically. "Sarah? Can you hear me, Sarah?" The call dropped. Connection lost. The screen red. He stared at the black glass of his phone, and that's when the reality of the long goodbye truly hit him. He's not just losing her physical presence. He's at the mercy of satellites and fiber optic cables. His entire emotional stability is now dependent on a Wi-Fi signal. "I can't touch her," he said, turning to me, his eyes wide with a new kind of panic. "I can hear her, sort of. I can't reach out and hold her hand. I can't feel the weight of her head on my shoulder. We're just ones and zeros flying through space." He started like this. He started laughing, but it was a jagged, ugly sound. How is this anything other than a slow-motion car crash? "I love her more than anything, but I hate that I have to schedule a moment with her. I hate that I have to schedule a moment with the ghost who is still alive, a man I used to be. Used to be. It's getting dark now. The first night is officially here. I'm looking at him, and I see a man who is terrified of the dark, but because of what's not in it, I need to ask you, and please be honest with me, because I have to know how to help him get through the next few hours. Is it possible for love to be a burden? Is there a point where the pain of missing someone outweighs the joy of loving them? Altogether, John is currently standing in the kitchen, and I think he's finally going to wash that glass. He's standing over the sink with the sponge in his hand, and he's just staring at the water running over his fingers. It feels like a baptism or a funeral. I don't know which. If you were me, would you stay the night? Would you slay the night? Would you soak on the couch so he doesn't have to wake up in a house that feels like an empty tomb? Or does he need to face that first morning alone to realize that he's still standing? And tell me this. How do you say goodbye to someone when you know you'll see them again in 6 months, but you also know that the person you see then won't be the person who left today? It doesn't just change the miles, it changes the people. How do I tell John that he's not just saying goodbye to the version of them that existed yesterday? How do you survive the death of a we while the you and her are still very much alive? Please tell me what to say. The silence is coming back, and I don't think I can find enough words to fill it this time. And then, the phone rang, not a text this time, a FaceTime call. I watched him scramble for it like it was a life raft. He had accepted, and there she was, a pixelated, slightly lagging version of her. The connection was shaky. The audio had that metallic, "Hi," she said, and even through the tinny speakers I could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "Hi," John said. He was smile that looked like it was being held up by fish hooks. He was trying so hard to be the supportive boyfriend. He asked about the apartment. He asked about the weather, about the weather, about the weather, about the flight. He didn't mention the glass of water. He didn't mention that he felt like he was drowning in the middle of a dry room. But then, the screen froze. Her face stayed there, caught in a mid-blink expression, blurry and distorted. John tapped the screen frantically. "Sarah? Can you hear me, Sarah?" The call dropped. Connection lost. The screen red. He stared at the black glass of his phone, and that's when the reality of the long goodbye truly hit him. He's not just losing her physical presence. He's at the mercy of satellites and fiber optic cables. His entire emotional stability is now dependent on a Wi-Fi signal. "I can't touch her," he said, turning to me, his eyes wide with a new kind of panic. "I can see her, sort of. I can't reach out, but I can't reach out and hold her hand when she's stressed. I can't feel the weight of her head on my shoulder. We're just ones and zeros flying through space." He started like this. He started laughing, but it was a jagged, ugly sound. How is this anything other than a slow-motion car crash? I love her more than anything, but I'm beginning to hate the phone. I hate that I have to schedule a moment with her. I hate that I haven't greeted a person who is still alive. I feel like I'm ready if the ghost of her is still the man I used to be. It's getting dark now. The first night is officially here. I'm looking at him, and I see a man who is terrified of the dark, but because of what's not in it. I need to ask you, and please be honest with me, because I have to know how to help him get through the next few hours. Is it possible for love to be a burden? Is there a point where the pain of missing someone outweighs the joy of loving them? Altogether, John is currently standing in the kitchen, and I think he's finally going to wash that glass. He's standing over the sink with the sponge in his hand, and he's just staring at the water running over his fingers. I don't know which. If you were me, would you stay the night? Would you stay the night? Would you stay on the couch just so he doesn't have to wake in a house that feels like an empty tomb? Or does he need to face that first morning alone to realize that he's still standing? And tell me this. How do you say goodbye to someone when you know you'll see them again in 6 months, but you also know that the person you see then won't be the person who left today? It doesn't just change the miles, it changes the people. How do I tell John that he's not just saying goodbye to the version of them that existed yesterday? How do you survive the death of a we, while that you and her are still very much alive? Please tell me what to say. The silence is coming back, and I don't think I can find enough words to fill it this time. John finally moved. He turned the faucet off. The sudden cessation of the rushing water making the kitchen feel even quieter than before. He picked up the sponge, and with a spun, he wiped away the lipstick smudge on the rim of the glass. Just like that, the last physical trace of hide it and put it back in the cupboard with the others. He leaned his weight against the counter and looked at me. His eyes weren't leaking anymore. His eyes looked empty. I said, "The first day is over. I'm still here. The house hasn't collapsed yet like a balloon losing its last bit of air. But I think I finally understand its last bit of air. But I think I finally understand. Saying goodbye to someone you love isn't a one-time event. It's not the wave at the airport. It's not the wave at the airport. It's a constant daily choice to keep loving a ghost, and again, I walked over and put my hand on his back. I've decided I'm staying asleep on the couch. I'll be there when the sun comes up tomorrow and the day after that. Because while Audit is the one who lost his partner, I realize now that we all have a stronger than geography, that a heart can stretch across an ocean without snapping. John went into the living room and sat down in the dark, not even bothered to turn on the lamps. He just stared out the window at the street, waiting for a tomorrow that will feel exactly like today, only slightly further away from the last time he held her. He's in trouble, yes, but maybe the trouble is just the price of having something worth missing. I'm going to go make him some real food now. Something that doesn't feel like a meal for one. But before I go, I have to ask you one last thing, the question that's been burning in mind since we left that diner 20 hours ago. If love is supposed to be a sanctuary, why does it feel like a prison the moment the walls are 10,000 miles and miles apart? And if you rudge on, would you rather have this agonizing, beautiful connection that hurts ever loved her at all, just to be spared the weight of this silence? How do you truly say goodbye to someone who is still living in your heart? Maybe you just learned to live with the ghost. What would you do? Would you stay in the dark, or would you find a way to turn on the light?